All right, so we're running down our Patriots draft wish list. Is 4 items. Doesn't have to be a player, doesn't have to be a position that just we, if we're running the Patriots, would want to accomplish most. I say let's start at 4. We'll go to 1, and if we have some overlap, which I probably anticipate that we will, we'll just jump on it right away. So your number 4 item on your wish list for the Patriots as we go into this draft starting Thursday night at 8.
Well, I would say number 4 has to be probably. I think an inside linebacker. That's kind of what I want. And when I say inside linebacker, I'm thinking of a 3-down linebacker, Andrew. So I'm thinking of a guy that doesn't come off the field. The Patriots over the years, as you've seen, and the trend is now that when I got drafted in 1995, Bill Parcells, who's obviously we all know has had a huge influence on Bill Belichick, was a big 3-4 guy, a 3-4 base. So it's 2 linebackers and the inside, 2 on the outside. That's kind of the primary base defense for a Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells type defenses that I kind of grew up in. They're going more away from that, more to one middle linebacker with a lot of nickel and dime kind of packages. And so I think this defense historically has always needed middle linebackers that are kind of, guys that just don't come out. So one guy, just give me one inside linebacker, Andrew, that doesn't come off the field, a la Dante Hightower, Gerard Mayo, guys that came, me and Brewski that came before that. To me, you need a middle linebacker. If you can get a middle linebacker in this draft, that would be huge.
I like it. I'll tell you, not on my list, which I hear all the points that you're saying. And I think, look, if they went linebacker, say Nakobe Dean falls to 21, right? I think it's a good, safe pick. I think I've just come from the standpoint of looking at so many of those players where you go, hey, he's really good. He's instinctual. He's physical, but he's 230. It's like it doesn't fit their prototype. So I've kind of gotten that out of my mind. I also look at this, as you mentioned, the nickel. They're playing with box safeties and have pretty much since 2017, right? And that's their way to adapt of saying, we'll keep the same personnel on the field and change up our looks with having to, shift guys in and out and provide another tell. It's the same group of guys. We can go from different alignments. So I like the linebacker idea. I just think they're more confident in what they have than we are, right? They look at Cameron Grown, Juwan Bentley's back. Who am I missing? Mac Wilson coming over.
McMillan, who knows? He's
right, because they're only playing 5 to 10% of base nowadays. But look, if I had a 4B on this list, that would have made mine. My number 4 was a developmental O-lineman. I know you talked about this last Sunday, on the show. I've talked about it with Alex Barth in the past. Just the idea of they're going to need a tackle at some point. Right? Like Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn are not staying healthy the whole season.
Right. Yeah. No. You're absolutely right. And so, if you were going to ask me what my number 3 need was, I probably would say O-lineman. And to me, the O-line clearly with Shaq Mason being traded and Teddy Karras being, shipped away is, Teddy Karras going to Cincinnati to sign as a free agent. Those are 2 big losses right there. And to me, everybody wants to, and I get this, Andrew, like you want to give Mac Jones a ton of weapons, right? So you want to give, everybody, you look at the arms race going on in the AFC, we want to bolster up our receiving core. Okay, they did that to some degree with Devontae Parker. Look, I'm not as worried about our receiving core maybe as some people are. So I feel like the Devontae Parker trade kind of settled things down there. However, one way that you can kind of look at maybe helping Mac Jones is by getting him better protection and getting him, protecting him from the inside out. And so I kind of harken back to, say 2014 when, the Patriots were 0-2 and it was on to Cincinnati and Tom Brady wasn't playing good and everybody wanted to know what the problem was. Problem was that Tom Brady was getting hit all the time. And this whole thing on offense works only when you can protect the quarterback. Okay. That's the number one thing. And so we talk about, receivers and tight ends and running backs and all the weapons. It really starts with the offensive line. So I am a little bit worried right now, Andrew, about the offensive line, interior offensive line. And so to me, for the number 3 need is got to be interior offensive line. I wouldn't be that upset if with that 21st pick they went guard in this draft. I know that doesn't excite people, but I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, and then you've got 2 good candidates, right? Right up the road, Zion Johnson coming out of Boston College, regarded as one of the safest prospects in the whole class, and Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M, who fits the profile of a Patriots O-lineman because he started at 4 different positions down there in College Station. So, you can kind of take your pick, between the 2, or you can wait till the later rounds where they typically nab a guy like you talked about, Shaq Mason. Even Joe Tooney was kind of a middle round guy that they developed really well. But they don't have a whole lot of time to develop there. Where if, I'm speaking more to the offensive tackle side, but you could go guard because you have a starting spot that's wide open. Like, you need to plug that. And I think this also speaks to, it's a good point by you in terms of helping Mac Jones. It's not just about, we hear it from Bill all the time, collecting talent. You're building a roster, and that roster needs to fit. So Mac Jones is someone who is going to suffer first and foremost from interior pressure, just as Brady did. They're kind of pocket bound, ground bound statue passers. And so you need to have that fortified first and foremost. So it wasn't a need down the stretch last year, but he played worse anyway. And I think if you're going to have a repeat of that, it'll be because of leaky protection. So I think you're spot on. Yeah,
absolutely. No, and it's you look at the offensive line. Last year, the offensive line didn't do too bad, Andrew. They were 8th in rushing throughout the season. They were 3rd in sacks allowed, which was a little bit surprising. And when we get into Mac Jones a little bit later, I'm going to talk kind of emphasize, the hitting of the quarterback, if you will, as being such a key part of kind of Mac's success, is just keeping him protected. But at the end of the day, the way the season started out last year, it felt like Mac Jones getting hit all the time. But at the end of the day, to only being 3rd ranked in sacks allowed last year was pretty good. They ranked 11th in teams pass block win rate last year. So the point is, the offensive line last year was one of their strengths, and now you have 2 guys that are leaving. One in free agency, one via trade. So that's a huge concern for obvious reasons.
Teddy stats. I love it. The ESPN pass block win rate. I was just going to jump in. You got Football Outsiders adjusted sack rate, Pro Football Focus. They're top 12 and all that. You're absolutely right. But of course, you mentioned 2 starters out the window. That's not a stat you can carry over to next season, especially the way things are ramped up in the AFC. Speaking of helping Mac Jones, number 3 on my list was just a slot wide receiver. This kid could start right away. He could be another developmental player. People have started to zero in. I think we get the groupthink right. It's mid to late April. We're all talking about the same kids. Kyle Phillips, UCLA, stood out from the moment he entered the draft process. Really quick, sub 7.3 cone. Like, guys who can just get open, who are sudden, I think. And when I remember watching training camp last year, you had that word sudden in mind. And there were only 2 guys in that receiving core that stood out. It was Nelson Aguilar, of course, didn't work out, at least season 1, and Gunnar Olszewski, who's not here anymore. But Gunnar was their punt returner. You need someone in the slot, 3rd and 6, here comes a cover 0 blitz. You got to get the ball out. And I think that's a guy, Kyle Phillips, or anyone else in that slot that can win over the middle of the field.
Dude, look, I'm a huge fan of the slot game. To think back, go back to 1995. The slot game was just starting to get in vogue. And I always want, who's the kind of one of the first slot receivers that were the quarterback, just like you're describing, like we've seen for years here with Edelman and Wes Welker. Who was that guy? If you can think about back in 1995, a division opponent who had a great slot from where did he go to school? Hofstra University. His name was Wayne Corbett. And Wayne Corbett was, to me, one of the best kind of the Jets used him in slot receiver kind of to a degree in which I think a lot of teams started seeing how impactful that type of player like a Wayne Corbett can be. And now you've seen it just get better and better over the years. So I'm a huge fan of the slot game. They need that element in their offense. Look, everybody kind of dogs on Jacoby Myers because maybe he doesn't look physically like the guy that fits that mold. I love Jacoby Myers on his team. I don't care. Whatever it takes to keep him on this team, I think you have to do. I don't think he's that bad in the slot, but I hear what you're saying. Slot receiver, a more traditional slot kind of type body, size and build is probably very much needed for this team.
Look, I'm with you as far as Jacoby Myers goes, and it has nothing to do with what he does on the field. This is purely selfish. We go to the locker room. He's a rookie. You know how rookies are under Bill. Keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. No. Anytime we walk in, even after a loss, hey, what's up? How are you? And I'm like, oh, are you talking to someone over my shoulder? Like, he's just a good, down-to-earth guy. He's not going to break any of their media rules, but he'll talk to you. And it's someone that, for me, like...
refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah. And thank God he took off at the back end of that 2019 season, the last time we've been in the locker room, because he was in every single story regardless. So sometimes you have to remind someone, hey, he's inactive for 3 weeks, but listen to what this guy has to say.
That's right.
So, all right, number 2 in your list.
Number 2, it's cornerbacks, and I'll throw some more stats at you. Look, at the end of the day, so here's what we're trying to figure out, right, Andrew? We're trying to figure out what maybe philosophically the Patriots are going to do. Look, you have, the last 2 years, the Patriots had arguably 2 of the top 10 cornerbacks in the NFL walk out the door. One was traded, of course, with Stephon Gilmore 2 years ago to the Carolina Panthers for a 6th-round draft pick. And then, of course, J.C. Jackson walked this year in free agency. Those were two excellent, cornerbacks. And the Patriots were okay with letting them go. So that's kind of a head scratch, and you kind of wonder, well, what are they thinking? So the thought process is for a lot of us, and I thought maybe this early on, is just that they're going to maybe play more zone. All right. So man-to-man is maybe going to be de-emphasized to some degree. And so with that in mind, you maybe the cornerback position isn't as big of a need, but here, let's face it, at the end of the day, you still got to be a very good man-to-man team to survive in this league. And so to me, the cornerback position is number one that they need to go out and get. And here's the interesting thing. Will they go get a cornerback high? I don't know. Because I look at cornerbacks, Andrew, kind of like how I'm looking at wide receivers right now. The elite corners is almost as if, they're going to get, if you draft them high, that second contract, more times than not, it's going to be another big deal that the Patriots probably don't want to pay. And so I think a lot of times the Patriots kind of look at receivers and cornerbacks as if, you know what, if we can get them in the middle rounds and then develop them, bring them along slowly so that when their second contract is up, they're not going to be demanding the big dollars. I know it sounds crazy, but I think that's how the Patriots think about that position. So that's one thing there. But, clearly they need help at cornerbacks. You saw what the team in the best team in the division, the Buffalo Bills, did to them the last two games. I mean, they were flawless. And you need to have a cornerback. So I was raised in the Simpsons where Ty Law, I always had great cornerback in Ty Law my whole career, the number one guy who could play on their best receivers week in, week out. That allows you to do so much more on defense. And so I think this team who's got to generate, pass rush, because although Matthew Judon had a good season last year, you saw him he ran out of gas there at the end of the season. They need more pass rush. And a lot of times they have to manufacture it by blitzing. So if you're going to blitz because you can't get pass rush with just four guys, then you better have better man-to-man guys on the back end. And I think ultimately that's what the Patriots want to do. So to me, this is a big need. I know the Patriots have gotten away with having lesser cornerbacks in the past and still done well. But in today's NFL, with the arms races and all the wide receivers that are in the AFC East, I just think this is a huge need for them. So this is my number two need in this year's draft.
Yeah, you hit on a lot there. And I'll work backwards from the scheme stuff where you mentioned, I'm with you. And we saw this change, honestly, midseason last year where they pivot to a little bit more zone. They just didn't have, when Jalen Mills is going to stick at outside corner opposite J.C. Jackson for the rest of the season because they trade Stephon Gilmore to Carolina. He's not a man player necessarily. Like Jalen Mills even moved to safety his last year in Philadelphia. He's fine, and they might even have him as number two corner for the next couple of years, but they changed schematically, and it worked. Their defense still held up until the end part of last season. Of course, that's tied to the pass rush, which you mentioned. So I think inevitably they want to do a blend. And some people, when you hear zone right, they're like, we don't want to play this soft zone. That'll get carved up. Because what did Brady do for 20 years? He carved up cover 2, cover 3, any variations of those, cover 6. And so the thing is, zone can be more than just spot drop. And you know this, you're matching routes, you're passing guys off, you're reading how they break downfield. And so there's kind of like a matchup zone element like in basketball. And I think that's where they would pivot if they can. It's just tough to see how they're going to run anything, though, without those corners, because you look at the way they've defended, and Belichick specifically, top quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, and Josh Allen have all seen man coverage rates above 70% in all the recent matchups against the Patriots. And they started to mix in some more zone against Josh Allen. It just didn't work. So I'll jump ahead to my number one, because that was a starting corner. Some guy, day one, if I'm at that draft board, Trent McDuffie might not be a multi-time Pro Bowler, but this kid out of Washington, I think you plug and play the zone I'm talking about and some of the man stuff, maybe even a little bit inside in the slot.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. So to me, and you need a bell cow back there, a guy. I'm thinking of like down the road, who are the future kind of core guys in the secondary positions right now? And they lack that big time. So get guys in that, they get them in the hopper and get them, kind of accustomed to what the systems are, so that, when these other guys leave, that they have their backfilled with new talent that has, guys that are going to take leadership on his team. So they need a cornerback in this year's draft. Yeah,
and I think you hit on that too. And you look at receivers, you can make the same argument, right? Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers are in the final years of their contracts. Devontae Parker's a free agent 2023, as is Kendrick Bourne. And how many times have we seen the Patriots make a pick and go, what was that? And then you look at the contract structure, whether it's Nate Solder coming in when Matt Light was still here, Isaiah Wynn even still, they acquired Trent Brown. The draft is not for building right now as much as next year and the year after that, because you're not going to have a lot of rookies, say for last season. come in, especially in New England, and just make an impact right away. They've got to earn that trust.
It's so true. And it's interesting. I mean, it's a great segue, what you just said, Andrew, into what my number one kind of need is or goal is. And I was just thinking about this is get more draft picks, acquire more draft picks. So so the Patriots right now, and that's what a lot of people think they're going to do with the 21st pick. They're going to trade back. It's weird to say, but I would say this year, more than any other year, I'd have no problem with them trading back. So I want them to accumulate more draft picks for the future because of what you just said, Andrew. I'm a little surprised. So my rookie year, 1995, Ty Law was our first rounder. I was a second rounder. Curtis Martin was our third rounder. Dave Wallaba was a center from Syracuse. He was our fourth round draft pick. And the point I want to make is that all four of us that were drafted in the first 4 rounds all started as rookies. Like I'm just used to draft picks, higher draft picks playing right away. I don't know what's going on with Bill. He has a reluctance or a hesitancy to play the rookies early on. And so that feels like that's just kind of like a thing that Bill over the years has kind of said, he doesn't just draft guys and expect them to come in and play. If they can, great, but he doesn't expect that. I mean, so with that mentality in this year's draft, accumulate more draft picks if you can, because everybody's saying that it's really, you can get good value in the second and third round. So why not accumulate more draft picks and try and get, I would say just more players in the second and third rounds if you can by trading back with that first pick.
Yeah, and this is the perfect draft for it, right? Like everyone's talking about the depth is 15 to 60, maybe 20 to 75, and you want to have multiple picks in that area. Though on the point about rookies playing, over the last 5 years, except for last year's draft, I think the answer is why they're not playing is because they haven't been very good. The Patriots had one of the worst draft stretches, 16 to 19. Before that, though, when they were drafting well, it was rare you would see guys start, except for maybe the day 1 or day 2 guys. And I think it was just because they had good rosters. So no knock on the 95 team, but you guys went 6-10 that first season, right?
We did.
Now, the next season, you made the Super Bowl. And that speaks to the developmental point is we're not building just for this season. You're looking ahead to next year, where I've talked about this when everyone's freaking out about free agency, and I think fairly so. But the Patriots rank in the top 5 to 7 teams, I think it is right now, in 2023 cap space. Mac Jones is still in that rookie contract. You have more players under contract than most teams in the league next year. They're saving their financial flexibility for next season when I think they want to make a real push. So you're right. Maybe take those draft picks, start them this season. You're not kind of admitting you're not going to compete. But when you just look at the landscape of the league, look, I don't think either of us are picking them to win the division. And I think they're probably fighting for a wild card spot.
I agree. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And so you're right. It's look, as much as we all want to look at the draft and when they draft and go, okay, boom, plug and play. That isn't the case. And so for whatever reason, it's funny you say they're just not that good. That's the hard part is always trying to figure out they're not that good, or what is Bill thinking when he doesn't play these young guys? And it might just be as simple as they're not as good as maybe we thought. And that's always kind of a surprise to me because the Patriots have been missing more than they've been hitting on draft picks. I'm just not used to seeing that. And so that at the end of the day might be the simplest answer, Andrew. They're just
or it's fit. We don't have to lay this all at Bill's feet, right? Or the kids' feet. They're coming in, they're working hard. It's just we didn't know about X, Y, or Z. Or you got here and Cyrus Jones. Look, that was a kid in 2016, corner, punt returner, fit the right system, coming from Alabama, and just completely flamed out, like just absolute disaster. And
but aren't you surprised? So exactly. But take a Joanne Williams. I don't know what you thought, but I look at his film and I look at when he was in Vanderbilt. So he's going into his third year or fourth year. Yeah, and so look, I thought, you know what I thought when they drafted him, Andrew, first say, oh, he'll be on Travis Kelce first year, rookie year, and it just hasn't worked out. It's just I think it's surprising to me to see just the Patriots in the last 4 or 5 years, and Kraft even kind of alluded to this in his comments from the owners meeting that they had to spend in free agency last year because they missed on so much draft. I'm just not used to the Patriots missing so much in the draft like they have in the last few years. That's kind of the surprising thing.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the league as a whole, right? The draft is a crapshoot. We can go down to the science. We can all put on our draft expert hats for 2 months and get into the 3 cones and just your explosion and the GPS tracking data and all this different stuff. But The answer is always, all right, we'll see. Once they get in the building, we'll just have to wait till they play football, which could spark a larger discussion. But I'll just go back. My number 2, I was with you at trade back, but since you already hit on that, I'll switch just to defensive tackle. And this touches on, why you had linebacker early and I kept it off my list. I think if they do a better job of protecting those guys in the middle, you'll get better production of Juwan Bentley, who's willing to come down and, pop helmets with a guard who's pulling around and coming in and does a good job of that. But they were weak up the middle last year. And I think, look, Jordan Davis, a kid from Georgia, 6'6", 341. Here I go, putting on my expert hat. He stole my heart in the college football playoff and playing down the stretch. He might go too early. Someone like UConn's Travis Jones I talked about before. A big guy in the middle, 2 gap, control the middle. It'll help everyone else in the back end.
It's so funny, it's interesting because when in the years I was there, the huge emphasis was on the D line, right? I had Ty Warren, I had Ted Washington, Richard Seymour. I had these big studs.
Vince Wilfork later. Yeah.
Vince my last year. And you're like, why have the Patriots kind of gotten away from these stud defensive tackles? And so that's interesting. A lot of people don't have defensive line in their top 5 needs, and you have them at number 2. But you know what? They've been terrible against the run, Andrew. And so I think Bill has de-emphasized the importance of run defense, but not to the level in which it's at now. It's in the bottom half of run defense. And you go, okay, but it's a passing league now. I get it, but it's about getting more possessions. The Patriots defense are on the field too long, not getting their offense opportunities enough because they can't get off the field. Why? Because they can't stop the run. So, you know what? In a guy like Jordan Davis, clearly a super freak. You have freaks, and then you have super freaks. Yeah. And that's Jordan Davis. So that would be incredible. A lot of people don't think he'll be there at 21, but boy, that would be very tempting if he's still on the board to pass up a guy like Jordan Davis, like you're mentioning.
Yeah, his football character checks out. His work ethic. There are no skeletons in the closet. Just grab him. Yep. Now that said, I would bet almost anything it doesn't happen. But the next segment we have here lined up, we list all the things we wish would happen for the Patriots. If you had to bet $100, here you go, Ted Johnson, to place at the casino, the Patriots will do X in the draft. Any round, any player, any position. What are they going to do this weekend?
Oh, okay. Well, I have 2. But you know what? Here's my. I got this. You mentioned the guy's name already, and I'm just thinking I can see the Patriots at the end of the day going offensive guard. And you mentioned Zion Johnson from BC. It's everything I've read about this kid or heard about this kid is like the perfect kind of Patriots type of player. And there's kind of been a history of there's been some really good offensive linemen that come from BC, really particularly centers and interior linemen. I played with Damian Woody. You got Dan Cope in here. So we've gotten local BC product to play offensive line here at a high level. So my feeling at the end of the day is if they go interior line guard at that 21 position, and everybody's gonna be mad. However, I have no problem with it because I just think you need a stud on the interior. And I will say this about the offensive line. I love the offensive line. I think it's the most important unit on a football team as far as setting the kind of tone for your football team. You need nasty guys. And so Zion Johnson fits the bill. And so to me, that's an important position or important position group that a lot of people overlook and don't think it's sexy. But in this case, I think the Patriots probably, I'm going to guess, if I had to put $100 down, that they go offensive line with that 21st pick.
All right. Yeah. Look, I think it's an easy sell after the freak out that is absolutely going to come if it's an offensive lineman in any kind of round 1. But look, we're not playing football in April. We're not playing football according to what the fans say or the media, which I'm very aware of. But I think you go, look, he's a plug and play starter. He's going to be here for 4 to 5 years. You don't have to worry about anything off the field. He's a well-rounded guy, played center at the Senior Bowl, shown at the Senior Bowl, which is always a big check in the Patriots box when they come to scouting these guys. You're protecting the most important guy of the franchise when you draft Zion Johnson. Make it about Mac Jones. As far as for me, they're going to take a defensive back day 1 or day 2, which, look, I'm not going out on a huge ledge here. Day 1 and day 2 account for 3 out of the 7 rounds in the draft, but it's just a priority. We talked about it before. You don't have the corners really right now. You don't certainly have the corners next year, the season after that. And Bill has just been loading up, particularly at safety, where Daxton Hill's a guy out of Michigan. Everyone has brought up. He fits and might follow Devin McCourty's kind of path, starting at corner and moving to safety. He's now, though, I'll tell you at this point, where you probably felt the same. Guys get brought up and tied to the Patriots for so long. that you're going, okay, well, this can't happen now. It's never
Right.
until Mac Jones, the most obvious answer.
Let me ask you this. Like, let me ask you before I answer my own question. Your thoughts on just the safety position in general. Do you think it's undervalued with the Patriots, or maybe just a position that's undervalued in the NFL? Or how would you think the Patriots value like a versatile safety in this system?
I think it's their most prized asset on defense. And you look at their spending dating back to 2017, they're in the top 5, the top 10 every single season. And part of that, look, you have a good in-house captain, Devin McCourty. He's going to be expensive the way that the high level he plays. But they see guys like Adrian Phillips, they signed in 2020. They had no cap space. They made room for him. Kyle Duggar gets drafted that same year before Patrick Chung goes, well, I'm going to hang him up. So you would have had 4 safeties that year in 2020, and they keep investing at that spot. And I think part of it is not only just, the safety now, those guys are the ones wearing the green dots. It's not the middle linebackers like in your day calling the plays, because they're setting the front differently from the coverage, and that's all on Devin's plate. So especially where Devin's on the way out, this year or next, I think they want to replace that single high guy, because Duggar's like a 4.5, 4.45 hyper athletic guy, but more in terms of power and explosion, not the sideline to sideline speed. So I think they prize that overall. And I think that's, why I mentioned Dax Hill, because they're going to continue to do that in this draft.
I'll say this. I just agree with everything you just said. I think it's an undervalued position.
Love to hear it.
And as a whole in the NFL, I think the Patriots, to me, so here's the end of the day, we're talking corners. If they went and got just a stud, free safety, strong safety, I'd have no problem, because I think they use safeties in a way that maybe a lot of teams don't. And I think this, strong safeties are becoming kind of the new it position because of all the, clearly all the nickel and dime teams play, and they need to be, honestly, not only bad, good cover guys, they need to be really good tacklers. And so I just think there's such a huge premium on that position, more than we maybe have ever thought about it before.
Yeah, no question about it. And you can look at this just from a value standpoint, right? Like, you're looking at a modern defense. You need a nickel back, you need a strong safety, you need a free safety, and someone who can play in the box. You get a guy like Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips. How about all 4? He can get by having 10 snaps of free safety per game. He's going to play in the box primarily. Throw him over the slot when they, split out these kind of tight ends. The F tight ends were a little bit smaller and running out in space. Like, they've got it. And so you save money, you save roster spots by employing these kind of guys, which, Bill has been loading up, and I think will continue to do, like I mentioned.